It's now in order to consider Amendment Number 25, printed in Part A of the House Report 119-255. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 25, printed in Part A of House Report number 119-255, offered by Mr. McCormick of Georgia.
Pursuant to House Resolution 682, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. McCormick, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise to offer an amendment to H.R. 3838. Mr. Chair, I rise and offer my amendment number 25 to H.R. 3838, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026. My amendment expands on language already in law, in this bill, and in the Senate NDAA to combat the indirect censorship of conservative news outlets in the Department of War. Section 1555 of the fiscal year 24 NDAA required that the DoD, when contracting with organizations that place military recruitment advertisements, must certify that an organization does not place advertisements based on political bias or the determination that a media outlet spreads so-called misinformation. The language is necessary because the DoD, or now the Department of War, has contracted with organizations such as NewsGuard and the Global Disinformation Index. According to the Media Research Center, the average NewsGuard score for the left and lean left outlets was a Green Shield rating of 91 of 100, while the average rating for the right and lean right outlets was a low of 66 of 100. A Global Disinformation Index reports on the online news list the 10 riskiest online news outlets as the New York Post, the Federalist, the Blaze, the Daily Wire, Newsmax, One American Network, the American Spectator, the American Conservative, Reason Magazine, and Real Clear Politics, all conservative. Left-leaning sites like ProPublica.com, NPR.org, NewYorkTimes.com, WashingtonPost.com, BuzzFeedNews.com, and HuffingtonPost.com were among the 10 lowest risk online news sites. We should not be excluding large swaths of the Americans simply because they watch or read conservative news, especially when considering that recruiting is hard enough without excluding this demographic. My amendment adds language to clarify that the standards on what exact bias looks like, as well as by striking the one-year sunset, including in subsection C. This language is already in the Senate NDAA, and I thank Senator Tuberville for his leadership in pushing this forward. And I ask for my colleagues' support on amendment number 25. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. And for what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
To claim the time in opposition.
Recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I yield myself 2 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. We've dealt with this issue on a number of levels. It's already in the underlying bill. This expands it to any organization that is deemed to be engaging in fact-checking. But basically, what this amendment has done, and it is in law from last year, now we're making it permanent and expanding it, is basically if you are an organization that checks for factual accuracy, we don't want to do business with you, which is just a remarkable statement in terms of how we approach this. I think we should want people to check facts. And just for example, it's not the Department of War. It's the Department of Defense. It's in statute, it's the law. The president can say whatever he wants to say, but the law still says it is Department of Defense. So if he wants to put into the law that he's going to change that, that's fine, but it is factually inaccurate to say that it is the Department of War. And yes, the statistics seem to show that right-wing news agencies score lower on factual accuracy. There are 2 reasons possible for why that happens. One is the bias that the gentleman, the maker of the amendment, says. The other is that they are more likely to be factually inaccurate, which seems to be the more likely outcome. And I also want to make clear, we're not excluding anything. In fact, this amendment is what excludes things. If you are an organization that checks facts, we are going to exclude you from who we're going to do business with. I mean, I would just let out a heavy sigh at this moment about how do you engage in that sort of conversation? You know, if you want to take a close look at this and say, the way you are checking for factual accuracy, we think it's wrong. We don't think you're being fair. We think you're doing this right. And they're doing it. Okay, fine. But no, we're just going to say, don't look, don't check, don't think about it. It's your truth. We're going to go, well, I guess the left-wing version of this is your truth is as much truth as anybody else's, and the right-wing version of this is we're going with alternative facts. I still want to live in the factual universe. And if you join me in that cause, let's defeat this amendment. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia.
I find it rather distracting that my peer on the other side of the aisle thinks that one person controls the truth and that, by and large, he thinks that conservative media is lying and that liberal media is telling the truth. The fact of the matter is, during the Biden administration, when all this came to be where we start fact-checking, recruiting went down miserably. We had a recruiting problem we've never seen in America since the Vietnam War. We had a problem getting the Army up to par. The only service that made their recruiting goals was the United States Marine Corps. I'd like to say it's because they're amazing commercials, but I'm sure it's far more than that. What we know is they have a job to do. You're hurting the recruitment efforts by taking out a demographic based on your idea of what's accurate and truthful rather than doing your job of bringing people into the military to make sure that we are sustaining a lethal force moving forward. That is our goal, and that is as American as you get, and it's not a partisan issue. Trying to figure out which news agency should be advertised on based on your idea of what the truth is really a side note argument that should be kept in this room, not on the political front in front of the future soldiers, Marines, and sailors and airmen that we need to sustain our forts. And I would say, since we instituted this bill last year, guess what? Maybe it's because we have a new president, or maybe it's because we can now advertise to the people who are most likely to join our armed services. And with that, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick points. First of all, I am not remotely saying that the left is right and the right is wrong or anything like that. This amendment says we're not even going to examine the question. That's the problem I have. I fully admit the left is wrong frequently. I think we ought to factually check that. Here we're saying don't factually check that. And while we're on the subject of facts, COVID played a little bit of a role in our recruitment problem. And I don't think anyone who is being fair about analysis would dispute that. And yet here we hear, oh no, it wasn't COVID. It was the fact that where we advertised, we didn't place it here. Come on. You know, COVID is what impacted our recruitment, which is why I think we should allow people to check facts. Not that the left is always right. They're frequently not. Believe me, I live those arguments back home in my district, and I argue the other side of it. I just think we should at least try and figure it out. And with that, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Cisneros.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to this amendment. I want to thank the gentleman for recognizing me right now. This highly partisan amendment would prohibit DoD from contracting with entities that perform fact-checking for recruitment purposes. Explain to me how we are enhancing national security, deterring our adversaries, and most importantly, increasing service member quality of life needs by going after a contract. In my previous role, I oversaw recruiting for the military services, and never did one of them ever come to me stating they can't recruit because of this tool. As the gentleman said, it had to deal with COVID, and it had to deal with because the services weren't putting money into their recruiting budgets. That's why recruiting went down. It's amendments like this that not only put our national security at risk, but makes this bipartisan process crumble before us in the House. You know who loves to feed disinformation through non-fact-checking sites? Russia, Iran, the People's Republic of China, and other adversaries. Republican leadership has continued to fail the American people by making this bipartisan bill a right-wing culture war process when we should be debating the the administration deploying active duty service members on U.S. citizens in our cities are managing the destructive mess Hegseth and Trump have turned the Pentagon into. We are dealing with this nonsense. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Washington reserves.
May I inquire as to how much time is left on both sides?
Seconds.
What's that?
3 seconds.
30. I thought you
myself-
said 3 for 1 second. But anyway,
From Georgia has 1 minute.
I can close, and then you have the right. I believe the gentleman from Georgia has the right to close. No. All right, then I
The gentleman
reserve.
from Washington has the right to close.
My bad. I reserve. Thank you.
Okay. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia.
I love the fact that the other side just said that it's factual that COVID is the reason we couldn't recruit. When I came into Congress and we had the President of the United States say we can take off masks, the pandemic is over. For the first 2 years of my service here in Congress, the pandemic was over, and yet we could not recruit. So therefore, I want to point out that the gentleman literally put misinformation in his argument, which proves my point. Should I censor him from being able to present his case right here in front of the American people? No, I would say not. He's allowed to give us misinformation like he just did. COVID was over, we couldn't recruit, and then we changed the law, we changed the president, and we have mass recruiting efforts being reinforced. It was a downright misinformation just to say that COVID didn't allow us to recruit. We've seen that in recent history. Pandemic's been over for over 2 years now. It didn't change until we had a new president, new laws. That was misinformation. To my point, you interpret your misinformation, I interpret mine. With that, I yield.
Yields. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington.
I yield myself the remainder of my time. Actually, you make my point. You just fact-checked me. Good for you. I disagree, which I'll get to in a second, but you fact-checked me. What your amendment does is it doesn't allow that. It just allows it to hang out there. You can't fact-check it. Facts are recruitment picked up a year before Trump came back in office. We all know this. Recruitment was doing better a long time, and there was a bit of a lag time. Yes, until 2022, 2023, they caught up with the lag. Recruitment improved for a year before Trump showed up in office. Now it continues to be well, which I would say argues that it was, in fact, COVID that drove through it. But I would love to have that discussion. I would love to have people check facts and have a debate, not cut off all fact-checking. Please oppose this amendment.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. For purpose of the gentleman
Request
seek
recorded vote.
recognition. So pursuant to the clause 6 of Rule 18 for the proceedings of the amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia will be postponed.